Okay, hi everyone. I'm Tom, the channel manager for the UK, and thanks for joining us today. Hopefully, existing partners at QNAP will have noticed that over the last year or so, we've tried to be a bit more proactive within the channel with the opening of our new warehouse in Swindon and more than doubling the UK team. Hopefully, we have the scope to do more webinars, training days, and partner events moving forward. So hopefully you enjoyed today, and thanks for giving us your time. Today's webinar is going to be about our new QTS operating system, and Craig's going to take us through a few of the new features and benefits. Please pop any questions you have into the chat window throughout the session. If we do pick them up quickly enough, Craig will try and answer on the fly rather than coming back to them at the end. And remember, the best technical question asked on the day will win a free Amazon Echo Dot. So do get involved. Thanks.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Craig, the technical manager at QNAP. So as Tom said, there are some people in the chat there, so we're going to try and answer the questions as we go along. Any questions that are relevant to what we're talking about on screen, I'll address directly. I will keep the webinar open at the end for a few minutes, so if anybody does have any questions that need addressing that perhaps my colleagues couldn't get to or we couldn't answer directly in the session, I'll answer them at the end. Any we don't have time for that, so we have to go get the answers from elsewhere, we will come back to you, so no question will go unanswered, hopefully. Okay, so today I'll go straight onto the agenda. So the agenda for today is going to be talking about our kernel upgrade that we've done. We're going to go through the different storage and backup features. We're going to talk about our hybrid cloud features, so we've got two options in there, and finally we'll round it off with some multimedia upgrades that we've done, namely to our photo station. So we'll go through all of those toward the end. Again, any questions, feel free to ask them at any time, and we'll try to answer them as we go through. So first off, we'll talk about our Linux kernel upgrade. So we've now gone to kernel upgrade 4.14. So this is a massive upgrade because it enhances the security. It improves a lot of the bandwidth utilization, especially on remote WAN links using TCP BBR, which we'll cover off a bit later on. And we also support next generation hardware. So that means we can have a lot more additions either via PCIe or directly included on the product when we start selling it. So we'll move straight through to the storage and backup features. We've got 4 sections here. So we're going to talk about our hybrid backup sync 3 feature with our Qtier technology. We'll talk about iSCSI and our new Fibre channel interface that we've added. SED stands for self-encrypting drives, so we've now added support for some self-encrypting drives, specifically some Samsung SSDs. And we'll talk about Qtier, basically the existing implementation of Qtier, a shortfall that it had and that we've solved with this new OS upgrade that we'll go through. So first, we'll jump straight into hybrid backup sync 3 with our Qtier technology. So moving on from our original backup software, which used to be called Backup Station, we launched Hybrid Backup Sync 2.1. We've now replaced that in the latest OS with Hybrid Backup Sync 3. We've already had over 1.2 million downloads of it, and we've added some nice upgrades to it. So namely what I was talking about earlier is the support for that TCP BBR protocol, which is an algorithm from Google, which really does help, especially on congested WAN links. We'll show you some performance stats of that a bit later. But primarily the biggest update is our Qtier technology, which is deduplication at the source on backup jobs. And we've also added a couple more cloud providers into the list as well. So we're supporting a lot of different cloud providers that are there as well. So the data deduplication, so all along we've always had our file compression feature. File compression only goes so far because it's compressing everything that's in the backup job. So if you've got 20 terabytes of backup data, we're just compressing that 20 terabytes of data. We're not getting rid of anything. We're just trying to compress anything that is compressible that's there. Moving on to data deduplication, it's much better because instead of being file-based, it's block-based, and we're able to get rid of some of the files that are duplicates. So for example, if you were doing a lot of virtual machine based data within your NAS, we're able to effectively get rid of all the duplicate stuff. So if you've got 10 Windows 10 VMs, a lot of the stuff between those VMs is just operating stuff that's actually identical between each VM. So rather than backing up the 10 VMs, we can back up effectively 1 VM and then get rid of a lot of the duplicate stuff in the other 9 so that we only have to back up the changes between each VM. So your mileage can vary. For example, if you were using multimedia files like pictures, well, each picture is unique, so you're not going to get much compression off a deduplication of, say, multimedia files. But if it was going to be sort of things like virtual machines, anything that's fairly similar between the data sets in different folders that you may have, different use cases. We're going to get an absolutely massive compression rate on it, up to 20 to 1 compression on it. So here's an example of a virtual machine deduplication that we did based at our Taiwan office. So the VM image size of the 2 images that we were backing up was nearly 16 gigabytes. By doing the dedupe, we were able to reduce the backup from the source to the target by more than half. So we got over a 2 to 1 compression rate on that, because a lot of the data between the 2 VMs, they were the same operating system, is going to be reduced. So it's only the change, it's only the data, the unique parts that were even backed up from the second VM to the second one. The rest is effectively just metadata changes between the 2. So it's very, very effective at getting massive compression. So you don't need a lot of storage at your backup target compared to how it used to be with, say, multi-version backup. The encryption, the deduplication is done at the source, so it's not sent across to the remote site and then deduplicated. It's done at the source, so the transmission to the remote location or to the remote NAS is done before it's transmitted. So that can save a massive amount of data, especially if you're going with, say, a cloud provider. So over 81% of enterprises have adopted cloud storage, and a lot of these cloud storage providers base the cost on how much storage you're using, how much data is transferred. So it can be a massive space saving as well as a cost saving by using deduplication. We also really do advocate multiple version backups as well. There is a negative with multiple version backups. Traditionally, they're a lot bigger, so your destination NAS for the backup data would traditionally need to be a lot larger than the primary NAS, because you're having the same data that's live on your primary NAS, but you're also having the data on your secondary NAS that's lots of versions of the same thing as well. So you can always roll back to different points within the data. So with multi-version backup, if you were doing your initial backup, so that's, say, maybe 15 gigabytes, your destination backup with QDedupe would be around half that if it was, say, a VM backup that we demonstrated earlier. The second backup, again, because it's all block level, is only going to be marginally bigger. It's only going to be a tiny amount larger because we're only backing up the parts that have changed. So enabling multi-version backup doesn't give you a big negative in the amount of space that you need on your backup target. So you could go from a single version of dedupe with a single backup copy to 20 versions, and the space difference used would be very marginal between the 2. If you enable multi-version backup, QDedupe option is ticked by default. In an update released the Hybrid Backup Sync 3 today, there is the option to disable QDedupe if you don't want it, so there is an option to turn that off as well. All data backed up using the QDedupe option is stored in a file format called QDFF. This is our own dedupe file format. It's generated via the QDedupe engine directly within the Hybrid Backup Sync software. So any data that's stored there is stored in a QDFF file. It's a bit like a zip file, if you will. It's something that needs to be open to be able to be seen what's inside it. A lot of people had concerns that this means it's all locked down to just being accessible on a QNAP. So what we've done is we've created our QDedupe extract tool, and we've made it as widely available as possible on as many platforms. So we can make it work on Windows, Mac, and Linux, specifically in Ubuntu. It's effectively a piece of software that will open up the QDFF file. It preserves the multi-version structure within it. It can also view the encrypted data if you've got the key to type in, so that you can view the encrypted data within it, and you can do file previews, so you don't have to restore something before you can actually see what's inside it. If you want to look at it before it's restored, you can. And it's also got some granular recovery on it, so you can do single file and folder restoration. You don't have to restore the whole QDFF file before you can see the data that's in it. So it's very, very easy to use, completely free software, and it will work on a lot of different platforms that are out there. So now we'll move on to TCP BBR. So it's bottleneck, bandwidth, and round trip time. So it's an algorithm designed by Google. It's effectively what pretty much all of Google and YouTube runs on. It's a very efficient algorithm that takes note of the total bandwidth available and utilizes it fully. So without TCP BBR, you're getting a lot of packet loss on a, say, a low latency connection. With TCP BBR, it tries to utilize it as best as possible, so you get some massive increases in performance. So you get really good bandwidth utilization. It's not really any good for LAN-based transmissions. It's really only designed for the WAN-based transmissions where there would be high packet loss. Traditionally on LAN environments, there would be very low packet loss. So here was a backup job that we did from our Taiwan office to somewhere far away. So we went to London with it. So we tried to introduce some quite high latency and packet loss with the distance. And we were able to get a just under 2 megabytes per second transfer speed total once all the packet loss was accounted for. By turning on TCP BBR, we were able to get that to 11 megabytes per second. So a nearly 4 or 5 times increase on the performance just by enabling it. So this would definitely enable you, if you've got a tight backup window, let's say your backup jobs are starting at midnight and you want them to be finished before anybody starts work the next morning, this could be the difference between that being successful or the backup job still happening while people are trying to come into work on their data and use the internet connection that you might be trying to use for the backup job overnight. You want that finished before anybody tries to come in and have any slowdown on their data. So it's a very, very efficient way to get data usage done across the internet, especially on a high packet loss connection that we've got. We've also got a total of 22 public cloud services supported. We support synchronization and backup with these, as well as the multi-version backup feature as well. If the provider isn't listed on screen here, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. If there's a very specific one to a specific region, we may not have added in the API for it. It doesn't mean it won't work. We can work with the provider and try and figure out what the settings are. Usually you can add them in with a WebDAV connection with some manual settings so that you can add them in. So just if they're not on this list, it doesn't mean they're completely ruled out. These are just the easy ones that we've added straight into the software. We also comply with the 3-2-1 backup principle that's very popular out there. So we do recommend that you have at least 3 copies of your data, 2 of which are backups, and 1 of those backups ideally would be offsite. And we can facilitate the TCP BBR to, especially with that offsite location. Perhaps one of your backups is at a remote location that you own as well. If you don't have a really fast link between the 2 sites, TCP BBR might be the difference between you being able to use that as a backup target or not. If you don't have the bandwidth to deliver it, you may still have to have everything on site and perhaps go back to the old trusted method of, say, a USB hard drive connected to one of the USB ports on the QNAP, and that USB drive gets disconnected and taken off site. But we would definitely mandate at least the 3-2-1 principle with any setup with a QNAP. If your data is only in one place, it's really not backed up. So you've got to get that data to as many places as possible. We've got some recommended models on screen here for QDedupe. So QDedupe is recommended to be working on our Intel and AMD based architecture, so x86 architecture and above. So any of our units that have an Intel CPU or have an AMD CPU are able to work with it. We've listed just a few there. In the enterprise segment, we do go all the way up to 24 bay units, and you can attach up to 8 16-bay expansions to those, so you can really expand it to whatever size that you need. And with the 16 terabyte drives now being available, the capacity can be really huge for a single entity QNAP there. So now we'll move into the next section, which is about our iSCSI and Fibre channels. So we've had iSCSI for a long time now, and now we're adding in the capability for Fibre channel. The reason we're getting into the marketplace for Fibre channel now is that there is growth in that industry, especially in the data center market, especially as new technologies come out within the industry. So 128 gig multi-channel fiber, there's talk of 256 gig coming out within the next few years as well. So the performance is really going through the roof on it, and adoption is still nice and strong in that marketplace. So we've now added the capability within the QNAPs after many years of requests from customers that we can now add that into the QNAP range as well. So a general user scenario with Fibre channel or iSCSI is they would have several servers connected to a SAN fabric. On the back of that SAN fabric, they would have multiple storage devices, not necessarily all from the same vendor. If QNAP NAS was part of one of those, you could have multiple LUNs in that space. So a LUN is effectively a volume that can be connected directly over either Fibre channel or iSCSI. And you can connect to those LUNs that you create in the QNAP with either. It can be Fibre channel, it can be iSCSI over copper, over fiber. It doesn't matter to us. You can connect and chop and change it. And you can also use things like Qtiering, SSD caching, over provisioning on those LUNs as well if you want to. Here's a little preview of the new application that we've got for the iSCSI and Fibre channel management. So it's much easier, everything in one place. Previously, we had the iSCSI controls just directly in the storage and snapshots application. So now it's pulled out here so that everything can be managed between the two technologies. A full list of features there between the two options, but the most important one is at the bottom there. We support multipathing both on iSCSI and on Fibre channel. So anybody that came to our tech day a couple of weeks ago would have seen the demo that we did on the Fibre channel. My colleague Jaus was doing a demo with a single Fibre channel connection, and then he enabled the second one, and the speed nearly doubled. So it was a really big impact on the performance by enabling the second connection using multipathing. Here's a little about the architecture between the two. So with iSCSI, sort of tried and tested, proven, it does have a couple of extra layers between the SCSI layer, effectively where the data lives, and the connection to the outside world. So it's got TCP and IP based in there. So these two extra layers, they aren't just there for free. They do take some resources to run those, whereas with Fibre channel, those aren't required. It just goes directly from the Fibre channel protocol straight to the connector. So a lot less physical layers, a lot less demands on the product to deal with it. We'll have a screenshot in a little while showing you the CPU usage difference between those two as well. As far as the connection types, with Fibre channel or iSCSI, it's really the same. You can either do direct connections, single cable, multiple cables, between the servers or the device that's using it and the NAS, or you can go via a switch. We've only illustrated 2 switches. You can have lots more if you want to. So you can do it either method via switches, direct connection. It's irrelevant to the QNAP. It can work with both methods. So whichever way you need to do it, whatever suits the customer's requirements. Here's a screenshot showing you the different CPU usage between Fibre channel and iSCSI. So in this example, we were using 32 gig Fibre channel with 25 gig Ethernet. And you can see from the column highlighted there in yellow on both sides, the CPU usage from Fibre channel is less, especially with certain types of tests. It's a lot less, almost close to half the CPU usage doing it. So that means the NAS is less busy with the transferring of the data. It can use its resources for other things, such as different apps from our app center, different features that we may have within the QNAP. It's a lot better on the product. Also would use a lot less electricity, say if you were doing big data transfers all the time, because the CPU is under less demand. We've also partnered with Marvel and Atto for their Fibre channel adapters, so they can work in the NAS. You can use those in the client, PCs, servers, whatever you're connecting to as well with the QNAP. If your distribution channel or your purchase channel for the QNAPs does not support buying these adapters, perhaps they don't stock these particular brands, what we have is we have our own branded ones as well. These are specifically just for the QNAPs, so we don't have any drivers for Windows or Linux. These will just work inside the QNAPs themselves. So we would advise checking the compatibility list up on our website just to verify which adapter is working which QNAP. So if you have a specific QNAP in mind, you can pick the right adapter and you know it's going to work when you get it delivered. And we've also got a couple of transceivers there to complete the offering. So anybody that needs Fibre channel, we do have a lot of different options there. And hopefully as the new standards come out, 128 gig, 256 gig, we'll start offering solutions for those as well. So here's a couple of recommended solutions. So we do work with Fibre channel all the way down to the ARM-based CPUs. So we've got the 1635AX there, and it'll also work all the way up to the enterprise and everywhere in between. Again, just check the compatibility list to make sure that the Fibre channel adapter you want works with the unit that you're looking at. Okay, so now we'll move on to the SED drives, so self-encrypting drives. So they are basically a drive that has an encryption engine built directly inside the drive. All the management of the encryption is built directly in, and the encryption key is typed straight to the disk. It's not necessarily stored in the NAS at all. So if somebody was to steal your disk, this is a very safe way that your data would not be accessed. So currently we work with the Samsung SED technology, so you can have encryption of your data without degrading read and write performance of the NAS, of the storage pool, of accessing the data. So you will maintain a very high level of performance with the encryption. We've got some screenshots to prove that in a minute as well. Within the QNAP, if you don't have SED drives, we do still have our traditional encrypted volumes and encrypted shared folders that we have. Both methods do use software encryption though, so they will impact the CPU. So the CPU usage will be higher when you enable it to try and maintain the performance. enabling an SED pool is very, very easy on the QNAP. If you tick the box that you're trying to enable it, we basically blank out all the disks that don't support it. So there'll be no messing around where you're clicking disks that don't actually support the SED technology that we've got. So if you select that disk, you'll only see the Samsung SSDs that you've got. You type in the password, and then you've got a pool created, a very secure pool. Very, very easy to set up and get up and running. It's really only 2 extra steps than creating a unencrypted storage pool. So here's a comparison on CPU usage between software encryption and hardware encryption. So we've got a 65% usage on the big read data there with software encryption, and on hardware encryption it's 36%. So it's a big saving on CPU usage by using the drive itself to do the encryption rather than the CPU in the QNAP. And here's a performance comparison between using that hardware encryption and not using any encryption at all. So you can see the read speed there is actually the exact same, whether you have encryption on or not. So we would definitely recommend that you enable the encryption, especially if you've got the SED drives, because there really is no performance drop by turning that feature on. So here we'll move into the different options that we've got within our Qtier setup. So in Qtier, we've got multiple levels of storage, so you can have hot data, warm data, and cold data all living on different physical types of drives. So your hot data may be on something like, say, a SAS SSD, your warm data might be on a nearline SAS hard drive, and the cold data could be on a SATA hard drive, much lower cost, larger capacities, to have, say, things like archive data, backup data, things like that, stuff that's not accessed very much. We support a lot of different types of drives within Qtiering, so you can use SATA, SAS, M2s, QM2s, and U2s. The only restriction is you're not able to yet use NVMe SSDs on our QM2 cards, but hopefully there'll be an update for that coming later in the year as well. You do get a higher capacity using Qtier over, say, a traditional SSD cache, because with an SSD cache, if you have 4 terabytes of SSDs dedicated to caching, that 4 terabytes is not added to the storage pool. It's effectively just a mirror of what's in the storage pool. So the extra 4 terabytes there is not available to be used for storage. It's just there as a performance boost space. With the Qtiering feature, any pool that you add adds its capacity to the whole storage pool. So if you've got 4 terabytes of SSDs, 10 terabytes of hard drives, and 50 terabytes of extra storage, you have a total space of all of them together, so all the capacity is available to be used. The system takes care of what data is hot, what's warm, what's cold, and it moves the data around within itself. You can do this on a schedule. You can set a smart mode. The smart mode will wait for a quiet period where nobody's accessing the unit before it starts moving the data around. But it's just going to monitor the access pattern, shift everything around so that it's where it needs to be. So stuff that's being accessed more today than it was yesterday is going to be in the hot tier. Perhaps yesterday it was only in the warm tier. So it's going to get moved around very efficiently within the product, ultimately to drive a higher performance, effectively making the whole product feel like it's SSD speed, when in fact you haven't paid for that. So the big update that we've made within Qtiering is we've given the option now to remove the SSD tier from the storage pool of Qtiering. Previously, it was all locked in, that you couldn't change it, but with the advances in SSD, some people may want to swap the SSD tier out for either a larger SSD tier or something that's a bit faster. So now we allow you to remove the SSD tier. Any data stored within it gets moved down to the warm tier. So in this case, example we've got on screen will be to the SAS hard drive layer. You can do the hardware change on the drives, and once you've got the new drives in, you can re-add that SSD tier onto the Qtiering technology again to gain access to that hot tier that was missing. When you remove the tier, it's not instant. Obviously, we have to have a little bit of time to move the data from the SSD tier down to the hot tier, to the warm tier, sorry. But it's very quick to do that because the SSDs are super fast. So now we'll move into the hybrid cloud solution. So we've got 2 options within here. We've got hybrid mount, which is a file-based solution, and we've got VJBOD cloud, which is a block-based solution. We go through the advantages toward the end after I've covered both options, but we'll go straight into the hybrid mount section first of all. So hybrid mount is effectively replacing another app that we already had, which was called Connect to Cloud Drive. Connect to Cloud Drive was good. It did pretty much the same job. The downside of Connect to Cloud Drive was it didn't allow you to access any storage that was mounted from the cloud into the QNAP via standard network protocols. So we'll go through that in a moment, but we can now access it via, say, a map network drive on a Windows machine. but you can still access it the traditional ways through our file station application as well. We now support 18 cloud providers. The mounting process is a lot easier, a lot simpler. We've got some screenshots of that in a moment. And the management interface is just a single pane of glass. Everything's done on one screen, very easy to manage it. If you already have Connect to Cloud Drive installed, when you upgrade to QTS 441, Hybrid Mount will automatically replace Connect to Cloud Drive, and all your settings will switch over, and you'll now have the extra benefits that Hybrid Mount has available to you. So the biggest change is that it now supports network protocols. So when you add a Hybrid Mount cloud storage into your QNAP, you can access it via a network drive. So if you were to use CIFS, SMB, WebDAV, FTP, you can now access it directly from the computer. So let's say you had something mounted from Dropbox into the QNAP. No staff in the office would need the Dropbox app installed on their machine. They can simply access, let's say, a D drive, which would be the Dropbox shared folder on the QNAP. Any changes they make in there, the QNAP makes sure it's updated directly to Dropbox. So much more efficient. You don't have 20 people in the office all syncing to Dropbox directly. Every time a file's updated, 20 people download it. It's all done directly from the QNAP with a single connection. So it's much more efficient on bandwidth usage as well. Of course, you can still access it through FileStation and our QFile app if you want to access it remotely. QFile is a great tool for that. We haven't taken any features away, we've just added to it. So we do have a total of 18 cloud providers supported, some file-based, some object-based, so depending which group you want to go, AWS, Dropbox, Box.com, whichever way you want to go, depending on how the business model is. We support up to 18 now. Here's a screenshot of mounting the drive. So it's simply pick the cloud service that you want. After you've chosen the cloud service, it will redirect you to an authentication page with the cloud service, which basically authenticates the NAS, gives it permission to access the cloud storage using your cloud storage account. And once the cloud drive is added, you can see here on the slide here, you can see the different options that you've got. You can see the total space used. You can manage it. You can disable it if you ever wanted to with a single click, and you can change all the settings all in one place. And there's some nice logging over there on the left-hand side. So if you want to see the status, who's changed what, when it was changed, you get a lot of information there on the left-hand side. If you had 20 people with 20 bits of software, you'd have to check a lot of different places to find out who updated what file. This way you can see everything updated in a single location. So moving on to the block-based solution, which is VJ-BOD Cloud, this allows you to have a large cloud volume. So let's say you had an AWS volume that was 10 terabytes in size. Your company had moved everything to the cloud because you thought that was the best idea. If you found that a couple of your users maybe needed some fast local access still to the data, which you only found out after you'd moved your data to the cloud, you could put a QNAP NAS in the office with them, and we can cache the cloud volume. So you could have just say a 2 terabyte QNAP, something nice and efficient, nice and small, just for that user. Anything that they access via the QNAP is going to be initially a cloud-based item, but the second they access it, we now cache it locally. As they work on it, they're working at local LAN speeds with that data. Any changes they make are being synced up in the back end back up to the cloud volume, so that anybody who is still accessing the cloud volume directly remotely, and they are still able to see any changes made by the person that's in the office. But the person in the office no longer needs any software to talk to the cloud volume. They're just talking locally to the local cache space within the QNAP that's there. So it's only going to cache what's hot, so the data that has been accessed, but the file listing that you will see will be everything available in the cloud. So you will see the full 10 terabytes available to you, but only a certain amount will be cached locally. You'll get a little logo next to each item as you mount them, as you download a different file. The logo will indicate whether it's in the cloud or whether it's locally stored. So you can see that through our FileStation app. So it's a very efficient way to do it. So it's available now. It is a beta app, but it's available for every NAS that we've got that's either x86 based, which is everything Intel and AMD, and any ARM 64-bit models to be able to create this feature. We do support a total of 10 different object storages all through the single dashboard. So it's very easy to access it. And this works with SMB, NFS, AFP, FTP, lots of different options. But everything is monitored directly through the one piece of software for both monitoring the gateway connection as well as the volume status. So here's the different advantages between the two. So we've got a couple of dots on the chart there. So the VJBOD Cloud is probably not the best solution for things like multimedia files. For things like Office documents, we'd probably recommend going with hybrid mount for those features. But anything that's, say, a virtual machine based, SQL database based, we'd probably recommend going down the VJBOD Cloud route. It would be a lot more efficient. So any application you can use on the VJBOD Cloud is much better because block level is so much more efficient to migrate the multiple data files up into the cloud than the file-based solution with hybrid mount. But depending on the solution you've got, depending which provider you work with, might denote which one that you want to go with. But we do have solutions for both options. So just moving into the last section now, which is our multimedia applications. So we're going to talk about our QuMagie application first. QuMagie is a replacement to the PhotoStation app that we've had for quite some time now. It's just added a lot more intelligence to it. Before we had some smart albums. The smart albums would work based off, say, geolocation tags, time and date, things like that. Now we can go to so much more. We can do things like objects, people, things, using an AI engine that we've got built in. So everybody takes a lot of pictures every day. Sorting them is usually not a priority. If you ever want to find a picture, there might be a lot of scrolling involved to try and find it. Sharing the picture might also be quite hard. If it's on a mobile device, let's say, and you want to share it off to somebody else to see, you've got to send it to 10 different people individually. Not so efficient to do that. If you put all of your memories, your pictures, your photos directly onto the QNAP, you don't have to do any organizing. You don't have to do anything to make the data work. QuMagie does everything for you. So it can organize people, things automatically into separate smart albums so that you can share off a complete album. So here's an example of making an album. So let's say you wanted to do an album with just people in it. So you can go one click on facial recognition to find the person that you're looking for. So you can find all the different people. Now, initially, we don't know who everybody is, obviously. So you have to go through initially and just label up. We'll find 20 different people and we'll ask you to name who it is. So we'll say, who is this person? Who is this person? Then every time you add a picture of that person going forward, they'll automatically be added into that tagged album that you've already created. So it's very intuitive, very easy to use, quite similar, I guess, into the way Facebook would do it at the moment. Themes are also very cool. So within the theme setup, you can choose different things. So you could choose from things like sunsets, food, anything with an ice cream in it. It's very specific. So we've got up to 400 different themes that we can use subject detection on. There's just a few examples on screen there. So it's very, very cool accessing all the different subject matters that you may be interested in. So if you wanted to create an album of every piece of food you've ever eaten, there you go, you can do it. Every time you ever were at a football match, there's every picture of a football match. It's very, very efficient at doing what it needs to do. All of this intelligence is powered by the QuMagie core. So the QuMagie core does all the facial recognition and subject detection. The core is effectively what makes it smart, and it works on any Intel, AMD, or ARM64 based unit that's got 4 gig of RAM. So the 4 gig of RAM limit is key. It has to have the 4 gig of RAM to be able to power this technology. Installing it is very easy. It's just get a QNAP NAS and have the latest firmware running on it. Install the QuMagie app, and it will install the dependent apps that go with it, which is Container Station and the QuMagie core if they're not already installed. And then you go into the multimedia console to just set the content source folders. So that's one of the last things I'll talk about here is our multimedia console. So this is addressing an issue that we had previously with our photo station and video station applications, whereas previously it was very hard to pick your data. So you might have a multimedia folder as the root share of all your data. That's where all your data lives with your multimedia content. Now within that, you might have subfolders that are set for photo, video, or music. Well, you had to go into the media folder first and say, well, this media folder is where all my media is. You then had to set in the properties of each of those other folders, whether it was a photo folder, a video, or a music folder, and then go within your applications and set the content source for each application that we had. So whether that's photo station, video station, music station, there was a lot of steps to do. With Qtier 4.4.1, everything is done in one application, and every application that we've got on the QNAP references this one console for its settings. Here's a little screenshot of it. So you've got your photo station, video station, music station. You've even got your DLNA media sharing location. So anything that's shared across your LAN for, say, a smart TV to view as well, can all be set in one location. And each of the types of data, so whether it's photos, videos, or music, can have multiple sources set within it. So you don't have to just have one folder for your photos. You can have the folders spread out in lots of different places on the NAS, which was something that was a bit messy to set up previously before QuMagie existed in the multimedia console. So this is all very easy to do, and Multimedia Console is installed by default on the NAS if you have the multimedia functions enabled. So the last feature I'll talk about is a video to audio transcoding feature. So we've always had transcoding in the NAS, which converts a media file from one format or one quality to a different format or quality, but it always remained the same. So if you had a 1080p video, let's say, you could convert it down to, say, a 720p video, so it used less mobile data, or it fit within the limited storage on a mobile device. So you could take it with you, say, for a plane flight or for a commute. What you can do now is you can do video to audio transcoding. So if you do have some videos where you can just listen to them, you don't need the video to take the content in, like a speech, a lecture, a tutorial, let's say, you can just take that video and we'll strip the audio track straight out of it and give you just an audio file so that you could load it into your music player app on any mobile device that you have for your commute while you're driving. And any files that you convert in this process will be just put into the video to audio folder located directly in the source of where that media file was. Okay, so that's everything. That's all the major new features of our QTS 4.4.1 operating system that we've got. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. I hope we were able to highlight some of the latest and greatest features. If anyone has any questions, I'll keep the webinar open for a few minutes and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can in the chat. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for your time. Cheers. Bye.